obviously, welcome to the Investor Lab, Shaun. I'd love to introduce you and a little bit about, find out a little bit more about what you do, and then obviously the reason we want to have this conversation in the first place is because I posted in the group last week just a little meme about flipping houses, and you dropped a pretty interesting story in there. We'll get to that in a minute, but I'd love for you to share with people a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm a local real estate up in Cairns, Northern Queensland. Been selling real estate now for coming up to 5 years, and been actively investing myself for the last 2.5 years. I've really started to see the benefits of it and really starting to focus in on that market and create those opportunities for myself. And yeah, it's been an interesting journey, and yeah, certainly learned a lot in that period.
Nice. So you got into real estate. You started real estate sales before you were an investor.
Correct. So yeah, started selling back in 2014. So just hit the 5-year mark, and then really started to see the appeal of property investing in the last sort of 2.5 years.
What do you think? Do you think that was particularly born out of the fact that you were exposed to a lot more of it in the sales environment, or what was the key pivotal moment that you suddenly, if you've been in real estate in the industry for a couple of years before you had that light bulb moment, it seems? Tell me about that.
For me, it was watching the Cairns rental market. The rental market in Cairns has been really on a growth cycle the last couple of years. And we just started to notice that a lot of properties were well and truly positively geared. You were able to buy them and have a cash flow coming in each week. So that was sort of the appeal for buying and holding, and sort of I just saw that opportunity in the market.
Yeah, nice. So 2.5 years in, tell me, just quick synopsis, what does your portfolio look like at the moment?
So at the moment, we've got our home, which if you want to class that or not. And then
I consider that to be a live-in investment.
Live-in investment, yep, I like that. So we've got our home, and we've got 5 other investment properties, of which one is a duplex.
Nice. 5 investments, one is a duplex. So do you consider that to be 2 or 1 of the 5?
That's 2 of the 5. So yeah, we've got 2 separate tenants in that one. So yeah, so 4 investments, 5 if you include the duplex, and 6 properties, yeah, in total if you include the duplex is 2.
Nice. So, yeah. Are they all around Cairns?
They are. They're all around Cairns, and they're all pretty close to the CBD. They're all within sort of a 10-kilometre radius of the CBD, and all cash flow positive. All of them return a paycheck into our pocket each week. Nice.
Now, I noticed, I touched on this just before we jumped on here, but I noticed the other day you actually won an award at the real estate agency you're at. Tell us about that.
I did. So yeah, I say we. I think a lot of the things I do, it's me and my wife. We're sort of a team. I guess as much as she doesn't have much to do with my sales career, I still sort of consider it a we. But yeah, I took out the runner-up sales agent of the year for our office. And our office has 16 sales agents, so pretty competitive, challenging sort of office to work in. And yeah, to take out number 2 was a bit of an honour for the year.
Mate, that's awesome. Cool. So you've been in the real estate game for 5 years. You started investing 2.5 years ago. You've now got 6 properties, so 5 investments, including the duplex, yep, all in 2.5 years. So that's a pretty quick progression. They're all around Cairns. So, and you've just won an award as a sales agent. So tell me, as a sales-focused real estate agent, are you dealing with many investors in Cairns at the moment? But before we get into your specific story, which I really want to share with people, and I think a lot of people are going to get a lot of value out of it, just while we're on the topic, tell me a little bit about what the Cairns market is like from your perspective. I got my perspective, but I'd love someone on the ground as well.
Yeah, look, it's an interesting, so to give a little bit of quick backstory before I sort of fully share my perspective, is I'm in sales and my wife's in rentals. So we sort of get the full 360 view of the market. We get to see both sides. We get to see who's applying for properties, what rental prices are doing and what sale prices are doing. In the last 12 months, I've sold just shy of 60 properties, and of that, half have been bought by investors. Okay. So we've sold about 30 properties to investors. That's me personally in the last 12 months. And what's interesting is the majority of those investors have been locals. They're locals living in Cairns, buying up in Cairns. We haven't seen too many people come from out of town and invest in the market. And I think that's where we may see a shift coming into next year, and what might actually start pushing prices up as those out-of-town buyers start coming in.
Can I ask what are the demographics of the investors, the local investors? What is are they boomers, so to speak, or what's the demo?
We're getting a range from, I guess, people in their late or even mid-20s. I'm seeing people buying up, all the way through to your boomers. Most are pretty much your typical mum and dad investor, buying one or two properties, middle-aged, and that's, we're seeing a real large number of those local sort of middle-aged investors buying in the moment.
Yeah.
And I think largely that's just coming from how crazy rents have gone over the last 18, 24 months. People are seeing that opportunity to buy into cash flow property.
Well, it's always been a very high yielding market. I mean, I've done some analysis on the market for the last 6 years, and it's always been a pretty positively geared space, which you would kind of expect with the market of that size and the typical median price points, I guess. Now, when you say about 50% of the properties you're selling are to investors, I know we touched on this before, but I know personally some property analysts and other buyers agents that were in the Cairns market in the last couple of years. Are you still seeing buyers agent interest in the Cairns market, or is it all locals?
So it's really interesting. So I track pretty much all my sales results, who bought them, where they come from, what they paid for the property, why they bought it, so on and so forth. And going back 2016, 2017, which was sort of the booming market, Sydney and Melbourne were booming in 2016. We were seeing a lot of cash flowing up here back then, and not many locals buying. Back 2016, 2017, you had hardly any locals buying. The Sydney and Melbourne market had that downturn 2018, started 2019, and the out-of-town buyers basically just disappeared from the marketplace altogether. And we actually saw prices pull back slightly, start of this year and during 2018. And then that's where your locals have stepped in this year and started buying and seeing the opportunity. And I think moving into 2020, I think we might see a lot of those buyers agencies come back into Cairns chasing the yields. And I think that'll be what will start to push up capital growth.
Okay, I would say two things from that, and I would love your perspective on that. I would say that would indicate that because of the contractions in the Melbourne and Sydney market, where people lost a lot of their leverageable equity and potentially their other properties, it's probably slowed down interstate investing from our largest population base. Do you agree? Which is obviously going to take back some of a potentially overinflated market or overinflated heat in the investment sector in any area.
Yep.
Why do you think? What do you think's changing in the market up there that will drive interstate investors back into the Cairns region in 2020?
So most of our properties are sitting at about a 6.5%, or most of the properties that I own, well, all of the properties we own are sitting between a 6% and a 7% net return after your council rates, body corporates, sort of those fixed outgoings.
Net.
So after body corporate, after council rates.
So you're saying body corporate, so
or insurance. So your fixed outgoings.
Okay.
So excluding your bank costs.
What would the gross yield be on a broad brushstroke sense, of course, right? Yep. Gross yield on a 3-bedroom detached house.
So we just sold a house for the Department of Housing, so government sale. That sold for $220, and you would easily get $360 per week rent for that.
But that's the Department of Housing stuff, and the defence housing and stuff like that's a bit of a different ballgame. What about just in the general market?
So in the general market, you could pick up something for $280 that would return $360, $370. So I just pulled out my calculator to quickly give you.
I was about to do the same thing.
So essentially $18,000 a year on your, say, you bought it for $280 is a 6.6% gross.
Yeah.
But that's something you could buy tomorrow. That's not an educated buy. That's not a below market buy. That's
something you could buy tomorrow. So you're sort of going to be hitting around about 7% yields.
Yeah. If you're a smart buy and take your time and research the market, there's no reason why you can't be buying something that's got a 9% gross.
Nice. Pretty compelling. And what do you think? What do you think the main drivers are up there in 2020? Because I know that it's been a largely tourism-based market up there for a long time.
Correct. But the Navy base is the biggest employer in Cairns, followed by the Cairns Hospital, which services all up into the Torres Straits. And the education sector is growing as well. You've got JCU and CQU University. So as much as Cairns is a tourism town, it's not so much anymore. It's starting to become more diverse, and especially as the population continues to grow. The reliance on tourism isn't quite as much as it was back in 2000, especially, like I say, the Cairns Hospital being a big employer, the Navy base being a big employer, the education sector.
Nice. Interesting insights. But look, that's definitely pretty interesting. It's a compelling story there for sure. Definitely one worth exploring.
Yeah, like I say, we sort of see both sides of it with the rental market and the sales market at the moment. It's certainly a picture that excites us, and I think there's merit to the market at the moment. So we'll see what happens next year.
I believe it. I believe you shared the view. I think we're entering into an extremely exciting period over the next, say, 5 years or even longer in real estate, where I think we're going to see some pretty strong growth in quite a lot of sectors. It's really just about positioning yourself at the right place at the right time.
Correct.
So anyway, now what we're here to talk about though is, as I mentioned at the start, you shared with me a pretty interesting story that I thought might benefit other people as well. In your words, you said potentially the fastest flip in history.
Correct. I would almost challenge anyone to see if anyone's bought and sold a property in a quicker time period.
Yeah, nice. Well, look, let's set the scene. So I know a little bit about it, but we've got to assume that nobody else knows anything about it at all. So let's set the scene. Tell us. Go back to the start. What happened?
Okay. So from the start, to go right back to the original start, me and my wife looked at offering on a property in this unit complex, and we just didn't quite come together. The sellers wanted slightly too much for it in our mind. We decided to let it go, and then my wife went and did some digging and found that there was a couple that had just sold one in the start of the year in the complex that owned another one, and actually contacted the agent that sold that unit to hunt them down to basically see if they would be interested in selling it. So that was the first. So essentially they come back to us and went, yep, we'd be interested in selling it. And that was unit 28 in the complex. And that one we actually held on to. The one that we ended up selling, the one that we held on to went unconditional. The sister of the owners called us and basically went, we wanted to sell. So that's where the original contact come from for the one that we ended up flipping. Okay,
interesting. So let's just take it back a little bit, reframe that. So you went in to buy one, they wanted too much, you bought a different one, if I've got that correct?
Yep, correct.
And then the sister said, buy mine too?
Yep.
Okay. So did you mention to me that they were off market, or was one of them on and one
correct?
Off?
So basically we brought up on RP data, which RP data in Queensland anyway, you can see ownership data of who owns what properties and who's actually sold what properties. We noticed that there was an owner that sold one in the complex at the start of the year quite cheaply that we just weren't looking at that point in time. We couldn't find their contact details, but reached out to the agent that sold that one at the start of the year, and he contacted them direct. And then they went, yes, we'll sell.
What made you think that they would want to sell? Like, why did you do that?
So typically, once people start selling off their portfolio, they normally eventually will cash it out. Typically, people will sell one a financial year and eventually clear out their portfolio. So it seemed like a good starting point. And being in sales for a living, we're constantly chasing people and sniffing out if there's any possibility of someone selling. So you learn to spot the little trends.
Right, that's pretty good. That is pretty good. I'll pay that. Okay, and that's how you got them off market. You just happened to be able to calculate enough data and go, all right, I reckon these ones are the one to go for.
Correct. So the first one we paid $175,000 for.
Yep.
The day it went unconditional, the sister called us going, we want to sell ours too, and basically said we could have it for $165,000, so $10,000 cheaper than what we just bought her brother's place for, which seemed ludicrous in our mind. And obviously she went, I don't have to pay agent fees because we'll deal direct with you. but yeah, still was in a position where she was happy to offload it cheaper, and we actually didn't have the funds to even contemplate buying a second one at that point in time. So that's, yeah, we ended up going in with a friend of ours and someone I'd done a lot of business with, a local solicitor in Cairns. We ended up reaching out to him and seeing if he would be interested in funding it for us, which he agreed to. So that's what made that possible.
Awesome. Let's take another little step back. So one of them was 175K, one was 165K. What was the estimated market value? Because I know you renovated and we'll get to that in a moment.
Yep.
What was the estimated market value from your perspective?
So there's two things that gave me a lot of confidence. Firstly, the one that we went to buy and then pulled it out of because they wanted too much. That ended up selling for $230,000. And I'd actually sold one in the complex about a year earlier for $199. So we saw the value of the ones that we bought somewhere around that 190 mark, as they did need work, but we had no hesitation that we could get 190 for them as is.
I'd like to ask you a potentially controversial question, but a lot of people like under market value is sometimes a very controversial term that people are like, oh, market value is whatever you pay for it. As someone in the game and as someone who's experienced this, where you've gone, well, that unit, all things being equal, sold for 230, and then I can buy this one for 175. What's your perspective on under market value and its validity when positioning it in the context of investment and buying and real estate?
Everyone has their reason for selling. So it could be financial, it could be health, it could be they've just had enough of the property and the tenants are giving them the shits. So everyone has a reason for selling. It's a matter of finding those people that have the biggest reason for selling and need to do it in a time frame. And that's when the opportunity of picking properties up below market value comes in. And I guess to further that as well is becoming the easy option for them to sell to you. So because we went to them hand in hat, basically going, we want to buy your property, we were the easy option. They didn't have to take it to market. They didn't have to kick their tenant out. There was no complications there. And because of that, the financial value to a degree becomes secondary.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's always, you touched on a really good point there. You said financial value, because there's many types of value in any transaction, in any relationship. And sometimes financial is just one. And if you can create value in some other part of the relationship, you'll find that you typically benefit in another. So good stuff. Okay, cool. Sorry,
definitely possible to buy below market value, and it's just a matter of knowing your market or working with someone that knows their market. And then I always say to people as well, it's not a matter of finding the best deal on market today. It's a matter of finding the best deal on market in a 3-month period.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. I'd agree with that. So, right, cool. So you got these two properties off market. You got the second one offered to you on the day that the first one went unconditional. You had to get a partnership to be able to fund that. Really top level. How did you structure that partnership? What did that look like? Because I get a lot of people that come to me who maybe don't quite have the funds to invest or whatever, and I get asked a lot of questions about JVs and how do you do it. Personally, I've never done one, so and I know that there are many ways to do them. But how did this one stack up for you?
So there is many ways to do it, and we essentially went down the simplest way possible. We're fortunate that the gentleman that we went in on the deal, we did know and trust quite well and had worked with since I essentially started in real estate. So for 5 years, I'd been working alongside this gentleman. He was able to bring value to the table, being a solicitor and being able to handle all the legal fees, so we didn't have to pay on that side of things. Mm-hmm. We were able to bring value to the table with the deal. And we were going to do the work and sell it. So we didn't actually end up putting a joint venture or any documentation in place. Essentially, the property went into 3 names, with him owning 50% of the deal. And then me and my wife, I owned 25, my wife owned 25. So we were essentially just co-owners of the property.
Was that a tenants in common or a contract, or do you remember what the structure was of that contract?
No, it wasn't. It's tenants in common and joint tenants. I think we were. Joint tenants is the terminology, which essentially is a little bit more complicated. So I believe tenants in common, If one of those partners was to pass away, the property automatically goes to the other side. Where tenants in common, if something happens to one,
yeah,
there is, it's details.
It is detailed, but it's a really interesting point because a lot of people don't understand there are different types of contracts and different types of contract structures and ownership structures on titles.
Yep.
I think if you're going to do a joint venture, or even if you're investing with someone, so I know people who invest with their parents or their girlfriends or whatever, or boyfriends, partners, all of these kind of things is really important to think about how you're going to structure that just in case something does happen in the future. So.
And I think for us, we had the clear goal. It was always going to be a flip for us. It was going to be a quick in and out. We're going to split the profits 50-50. There wasn't so many complications there. Yeah. And at the price that we picked it up for, we were always confident that we could sell it. We were confident we'd make a profit in it, but worst case scenario, we would have got our money back. So it was always pretty simple. So we've kept the paperwork simple in that regard. Nice.
Okay, cool. So you got these two properties. You got someone to finance the second one. You did a renovation on them. Like, tell me really quick 60-second snapshot on that. And then I want to really dig into the timeline on this fastest flipping possible. And then I want to know how it all stacked up financially.
Yep.
Because I think this is what's going to benefit a lot of people to understand exactly the steps that you can take to achieve this kind of thing and how quickly you can do it and what the returns can be.
I think it's really important before you start any renovation project is to have, or anything really, is to have the end goal in mind. And we went into this really wanting to get bang for our buck. So the renovations we did were really cosmetic, simple, quick renovations that were going to add a lot of visual appeal to the property. And then we relied heavily on property staging to bring it all together and create that emotion for the buyer. So the renos we did were, it was all blue, ugly carpet. I'll post some photos to the group later on. But essentially blue, ugly carpet.
Yeah.
Blue, ugly carpet, we changed over to just a timber look vinyl. I think we paid like $2,500 for the flooring to get changed over. We painted the unit in its entirety. And then we actually ended up laminate painting the kitchen. So we didn't replace the kitchen, we just painted it. And we painted the bathroom vanity. All up, our reno costs were essentially $7,000
per unit or total.
For the one unit, for the unit we flipped. So we had spent $2,500 on flooring.
Yeah.
Spent $2,000 on an air conditioner. $1,000 on paint, lights, bits and pieces. Essentially, it was a $7,000 reno budget we did it in.
Okay, and that was the one that you bought for 165, is that right?
Yeah, 100. We ended up buying it for 162. We ended up negotiating on the 165.
Okay, so we'll call it 170 round figures, including reno.
Yeah, 170 plus our stamp duty, which was another $4. So we ended up in it for 177 by the time it was all said and done.
Okay, awesome. And what was the sale price on that?
So that one ended up, we took it to market. First open home, we had 2 offers come in at both at 220, and our goal was always 220 to sell it. Those parties we went to and basically went, look, we'll have an answer back to you on Monday. Monday, a third group come along and ended up offering 250, and it sold at 250.
I can understand why. Mate, that's awesome. That's a $73,000 windfall.
Correct.
You know, so that's a $73,000 windfall, and if I assume correctly, it was essentially no money down.
Correct.
Okay, no money down. You spent, let's say, round figures, $15,000 on stamps and bits and pieces, and coffees while you're doing the reno, whatever. We'll call that $15,000. So $15,000 in, at $73,000 out. What was the time frame?
So we actually settled on it on the 27th of August. We had it on the market 8 days later, being the 4th of September. It went under contract on the 11th of September and settled on the 12th of October. In total, it was 45 days of ownership from settled to settled.
45 days of ownership. So you made, well, let's call that $60,000 in 45 days. Mate, that's pretty that's pretty good in anyone's book.
So the renovation was only an 8-day reno, and then it was on the market for 7 days before it went back under contract. So 15 days. The rest was just waiting for settlement.
So we'll call it 60 grand in 60 days.
Call it, yeah, essentially 73 grand in 15 days.
Mate, that's mate, that is pretty good. That is pretty good going by anyone's book. And the other unit, did you end up keeping that?
So the 70 grand we made, we did split 50-50 with the guy that financed it. Which just we weren't in a position to do it at all, so I was quite happy to pay him his 50%.
Sounds like a great way to spend a few days.
we both won from it, so there was it was everyone was happy, everyone was a winner from it.
Yep.
So we ended up walking away essentially with 36,000 in our pocket from that deal, but on that we do get taxed. The better profit we made was the equity we ended up freeing up in the other unit from the sale of that unit. So about a month after the unit that we sold settled, we actually arranged to get our unit refinanced, the one that we held on to. And the valuation on that one come in at 235. So we bought it for 175, spent a similar budget on it, renoing it. And then had it revalued. So we ended up accessing 48,000 of equity that we didn't have earlier. Okay,
so 35, 48. So you've got about, let's say, 35 grand. Is that right? Roughly 50% of the out of the first one.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. So we got 36 out of the first one minus your taxes.
Yeah, minus all that kind of stuff, and then 48 out of the second one, and that's all in the space of a pretty short period of time, mate.
Yeah, very, very short period of time. But a lot of that profit was buying it below market to begin with.
Yeah.
I think we picked up 30 grand, but when we bought it below market, a big part of the sale price and achieving that price wasn't so much the renos we did, but the furniture staging. That price range in Cairns, typically properties are presented pretty poorly. They're often tenanted with the tenants not really caring how they're presented for sale. And they're not the most appealing properties when you walk into them. Where we had that one fully staged like it was $1 million home. It looked absolutely fantastic, even though the renos were cheap. And that was the difference in the result in the sale price.
Nice, mate. That's a pretty good result and very intelligent way to approach it by strategically positioning your investment in the best possible way in the marketplace. It makes really good business sense. I think a lot of people don't necessarily think about real estate as a business, but essentially what you've done there is you've thought about how you can put your product, i.e. the unit, into the market and present it in a way that's going to be most appealing to your potential clients. A lot of people kind of miss that step and they just think, oh, I'm just going to advertise it and see what happens.
And I think if you're talking about holding on to properties, a lot of people, especially at your lower price points, aren't using professional photography to advertise the properties for rent. And I think you can easily gain $20, $30 a week just by having the property professionally marketed for rent. It's so easy to position yourself above the competition in the rental side of things when you're looking at holding on to properties for the long term and gaining that, an extra $30 a week is an extra $1,500 a year in your pocket.
Yeah, that can make a massive difference. Not only to your bank balance, obviously, but to your ability to borrow and keep borrowing more finance to keep investing.
And that's, like professional photography in Cairns, in most markets, you can get someone out to photograph a property well for about $200. So the rental increase, you've made it back in 8-9 weeks. You've made your professional photography back.
That's a great perspective to have, I think, and something that I think a lot of people miss. So, mate, that's pretty solid. It's really exciting to see that you could not only buy cheap. Now, I'm a big advocate of houses, detached houses, as opposed to units, but I'm also a massive proponent of encouraging people to invest how they can, when they can, in a way that's going to give them the propulsion to move forward. And one of the things that I often talk to our clients about is, a really good starting point is, typically over 200 grand or typically over 250,000. Sorry, mate, 1 second. Typically over 250,000. But that being said, someone only has the funds to be able to get into the market at 150, 170 or whatever. It's about getting creative in a way that is going to give you that kind of leverage and that expansion.
I think at any price point, there's profit to be made, be it if you're buying into $1 million market, you obviously need a lot bigger budget. But even if you're buying into a $150,000 unit, if you buy well, there's nothing stopping you making 10, 20, 30% equity the day that you actually settle. Yeah. So I think it's just knowing your market or having someone that knows the market working for you to position yourself to buy below market value so that the day it settles, you're instantly in the green, instantly making money from it. And the lower price points, it's just so accessible for the average mum and dad, and there's profit to be made there.
100%. I couldn't agree more, and I think it's one of the most overlooked ways to start accelerating, because there's no point. You're going to be able to accelerate your wealth position faster than if you try and save. So if you've got it in your mind that you need to start at $700,000, it's going to take you a lot longer to get into the market, and that's ultimately going to slow down your progression in the long run. So
yeah, if you can pick up that, put it this way, to even compare the two units, so like the one that we held versus the one that we sold. So the one that we sold, we made 36,000 on. The tax man's basically going to take about half of that from us. So we'll only end up with probably close to 20 grand on that one by the time the tax man does his thing and takes it from us. Where the one that we refinanced, we accessed 48K of equity tax free. So that $48,000 equity was enough for us to buy our next property on, and is tax-free. So for me, the unit we kept was actually worth a lot more to us than the one that we sold.
And this is actually a really exciting point that you touched on. And this is something I talk to people a lot about, this idea of flipping and selling versus flipping and holding. A lot of people have it in their mind that if they're going to do a renovation, they've got to flip and sell, and that's the only way you can make money. But then you lose all the money in capital gains and taxes and all those kind of things. So the reality is, so much of your profit is going to go straight down the drain. But go on.
Without even including the tax man, you're essentially losing about 8% of your property price between your stamp duty when you buy in and then paying an agent on the way out, plus your solicitors, plus your bank fees. You're losing about 8%. So there's certainly a big appeal to refinancing a deal and accessing the equity that way rather than selling.
Well, it's kind of like, the way I say it, it's basically the way to use your money the most effectively. It's like unlocking the riches in real estate and keeping it in real estate. You don't need to take it out of real estate and then try and put it back into it. Just keep it in it and just move it and reposition it. And if you can do that strategically enough times, then that's how you're going to be able to build your portfolio in a way that it's going to be able to start paying you direct dividends out of it without having to cash out and lose the asset and lose money on the way out. Absolutely.
And I think people think tax minimisation and instantly go, we need to negative gear our properties, which it has its flaws. Where the best tax minimisation is to hold on to the property for the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And this is one of the things that I encourage people to do. And I guess it's a core part of our strategy within our business is encouraging people to build a legacy that they can pass on, but also pays them, right? Because this idea of having to hold on, a lot of people that get stuck at, say, one or two properties, typically probably negative geared, stuff like that. Their idea is buy two properties, keep shoveling money into them, and then in 20 or 30 years, we'll sell them and we'll have this pile of cash. And then hopefully we don't die too quick, right? And we don't run out of all that money. Versus actually just continuously repositioning your money within the assets you already have to create a larger pile that gives you the ability to live off that whilst keeping everything and not having to pay tax on it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you create that snowball as well by holding on to them, especially if you are paying them off over a 30-year period. You've got the loan pay down happening. You've got prices slowly tricking up or quickly, or even if they're not tricking up, you're still gaining equity from the loan pay down, gaining cash from the cash flow. If you're putting that back into the loan or putting that into an offset account, you're gaining position from each property. So if you're buying positively geared below market value, you're just into that market, and one just rolls into the next so quickly, and it does accelerate the process so quickly if you do it right from the get-go.
100%. Well, 2.5 years in, you've got 6 properties. That's not bad going.
And if that just wouldn't be possible, I don't think, if you weren't being strategic with each purchase. And that's where you need to know the market intimately, or have someone that knows the market intimately, or it's not going to work for you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's obviously what we're both doing in our own respective ways. You've got your selling in the Cairns market, and myself as a buyer's agent around. And then that's ultimately what we're trying to help people do, is to try and find those positions in the market and get the best out of it. So.
No, absolutely. And I think it's, like I say, the snowball effect of when you do get the recipe right, the snowball effect is just so powerful, and the wealth and portfolio you can grow, and the cash flow opportunities there. Yeah.
Exciting.
It's very exciting. It's very exciting, and nowhere near as daunting as what I think people can think at first too. Like, if you've got the right team and surrounded by the right people and do the right research, there's just so many opportunities, be it in any marketplace, be it Cairns, Melbourne, Sydney, Townsville, wherever you're buying, there is opportunities if you know the market well enough.
If you know the market, and if you can position yourself at the right point in the market to make the most amount of gains strategically with the lowest risk, it's an absolute no-brainer. And I mean, the reality is, it doesn't need to be daunting either. I think a lot of people overcomplicate it in their minds, and it becomes a stonewall effect because they don't understand the mechanics of it, or A, what can be done, or B, what's involved. It was really, I think, one of the things I advocate the most is it's actually really simple. Once you can understand the mechanics and the key things you need to find and analyze, it's actually pretty simple. Does the property do X, X, and X? And if it does, and is it you positioned in a market that can do X, X, and X? Great. And it does, cool. Go for it, and it's going to work. So
absolutely. And I think at the end of the day, if nothing changes, nothing changes. If you continue to plod along, and there's opportunities to just leverage your money so well in Australia at the moment, and the way everything's designed, and interest rates being at record lows just helps so much. Like, you're borrowing at 3.3 or less even at the moment. It just, if you're getting a 6% even gross on your properties, it's a good return they're generating. And I see capital growth as a bonus on top of that. But even if you're just buying purely for the cash flow, it just makes sense in the economy at the moment.
100%. Well, man, let's wrap it up. It's 7:10, but thanks for sharing your insights. So, key takeaways. You got into the market super cheap, 2 units. You did a partnership deal or JV deal, stacked up cash with a flip, but actually benefited way more out of refinancing out of the one that you had, which is obviously a big lesson that you learn. You managed to get those deals off market and turn around in a few weeks. So it's pretty achievable if you know where you're looking, right?
Absolutely. And just, I think if you're buying, look for those below market value opportunities, do the research, do the time, or have someone do it for you.
What do you think the 3 things that people need to look for in a property are then?
Has to be below market. You've got to make money day one. And like you were saying earlier, people do look at that and laugh and think it's a bit controversial because the market's the market, but it's not. So often people they don't look past the blue carpet, or they don't look past something that's really simple, or the sellers just genuinely need a quick sale. They've got financial pressure, or they're retiring. They've owned the property outright. A few dollars doesn't make much difference to them. So finding that opportunity to buy below market is absolutely crucial. And then buying into the right market, I guess, is the second thing. If you get those 2 boxes ticked and you're at the right price point, the rest sort of takes care of itself.
And cash flow.
Cash flow, absolutely. Always cash flow.
Always cash flow.
Always cash flow. But look, I think any properties can be a good deal if you pick it up at the right price.
Yeah, nice. Great stuff, man. Well, look, thanks for sharing. Thanks for jumping on here. Good to connect. Good to share your story. And thanks for everything.